It gives me great pleasure tonight to introduce Andrew Freear, who is the director of the Rural Studio, or he says co-director in the main part of the university, but director in Newbern, where it's based. Andrew is a graduate of the AA. He spent the usual kind of painful diploma here, and prior from being at SOM, returning to Chicago, teaching with the university there, ending up working with the late Samuel Mockbee, who had set up the Rural Studio approximately 10 years ago. Samuel Mockbee died just over a year ago and was recently passed over for the AIA Gold Medal, which is a sort of point of some sort of scandal at the moment. Now, introducing the Rural Studio, we went out there with our unit recently, which, contrary to what it says in the events list, is not a popular destination for unit trips, and if anyone else is thinking go there, you have to be very nice to Andrew tonight in the bar, because you get a fantastic tour and it's a lot of effort for them. And meanwhile, they're building buildings. Students are building buildings with their hands for impoverished people, and so enabling a sort of strange mash of education, both the students for being able to build with their own hands a building, for the local population to be enabled to live better and more decent lives, and for all the observers and aid agencies really to kind of start to see a kind of crucial experiment in the social. And this all sort of slightly reminds me of kind of a lecture I suppose would have been going on about 100 years ago in this. Was the lecture hall 100 years ago here? But you know, Detmar Blow and the Wandering Architects, who in England were going out and building buildings with their own hands, using that, going as the most extreme end of the arts and crafts movement, which I suppose is the last time that architects have really built buildings with their own hands. And that compiled with, you know, the whole thing about emergency shelters and prefabrication and structures and where you go for architecture, really, I think, leaves the Rural Studio as an incredibly important experiment and event, I think. And I think also in light of, you know, the fact that we do at the AA have a sort of ongoing and fumbling tradition of trying to make things down in the workshop and now out down at Hook Park. So can I welcome Andrew Freear.
Okay, you can all hear me, I guess. This is really frightening. All of these ghosts from the past are sitting up here in the front row. Golly. I'm delighted to be here. This is frightening, and I have to say that it's kind of an honor to be here, because I know the late Samuel Mockbee would be delighted to be giving this lecture. He was actually a member of the AA, unlike me, and was always, I think one of the reasons he hired me was because I had this thing at AA after my name, and he didn't quite know what it was, and so it was, I think it was kind of slightly flattering. I always wanted to know what the hell the guy from the AA was doing in the middle of Alabama, and I guess I still ask myself that question. But thanks to Belinda and Moisen for the invites, and obviously to Mark and Peter for they had a great time, and we had a great time when they visited. They've kind of gone down in the annals or the annals of Rural Studio history as, I think, being the most popular visitors so far. I was going to show some slides tonight, but there were far too many of Mr. Prizeman naked that I could. We couldn't sift any decent ones out, so it's been edited. And also sitting in the front row is Tim McFarlane. He actually engineered a whole bunch of these projects that you're going to see. He's probably sitting in an airport somewhere in New York, but so he's to blame for a lot of the nonsense that you're going to see. It would be ridiculously amiss of me to not talk a little bit about this guy, big fat white guy from Mississippi with the wonderfully politically incorrect name of Sambo Mockbee. It was curious sending the title of the lecture, and whoever it was puts your lecture thing together. he's not allowed to be called Sambo, he has to be called Samuel, because obviously there's some ghosts from the past there. And for me, the lovely, I went to Alabama with the same preconceptions of preconceptions of the term Sambo, and it's now I don't find any difficulty in using the name. He was a wonderfully warm and generous guy, and friendly, childlike in many ways, but just extraordinarily warm. And it's very easy for me to call him Sambo, so I'm going to use the name tonight whether you all like it or not. He was probably one of the best known architects in the southern part of the United States. He worked in a practice with Coleman Coker, and I think they're probably up there with Max Scoggin and Merrill Elam. They were the kind of the movers and shakers in the southern part of the United States. There isn't much going on down there, and these guys were doing it. 10 years ago, he went off into deepest Alabama to set up the Rural Studio, and unfortunately 5 years ago he contracted leukemia. He was 3.5 years in remission from leukemia, had gone through a great battle, and 14 months ago we lost him, and it was a great shock to us all. 2 years ago he was awarded a thing called the MacArthur Fellowship. That's $500,000, no strings attached, to artists and people that have kind of made great contributions to the art and architecture world. And unfortunately, they give $100,000 a year. This guy had not made any money going and living in the middle of Alabama doing this, as you can imagine. And he also had a son who has kind of learning difficulties, and he was going to use the $500,000 to look after, secure the future of his son. And unfortunately, he died 2 days short of the second payment, and all the rest of the money is not going to be given to the family. So it's a little bit tough for everybody to take that, I think. Anyway, the MacArthur Fellowship is actually kind of better known as the Genius Award, and I have the privilege of working with this genius for in the region of 3 years. I think that what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to show you a very extensive body of work that is the Rural Studio. I think it's an incredibly fitting tribute to him and the spirit of Sambo. I think the Rural Studio is not personality. I mean, before he died, he actually set up a team of really extraordinary people who are committed to keeping this thing going in his name and in the right spirit. And I think we're doing okay. But it was amazing for me as both a teacher and an architect and whatever the hell else I am to work with somebody who would just he was truly an artist. He just at the end of the day, he said his kind of catchphrase was "make it pretty," and they, in the kind of the pretentious world that is academia, to have someone just go and say, this thing really has to be very beautiful, screw all the rest of it, make it beautiful, was extraordinarily refreshing, and so I kind of admire him for that. So 4 years ago I kind of stumbled into this. I had met him, I guess, 6 years ago in Chicago. Hadn't met an architect like this guy in the United States of America. Had both a very, very naughty sense of humor, an amazing passion, but also wanted to kind of use architecture to help people. And for him it was about lifting people's spirits. And he lifted people's spirits, both the rich and the wealthy clients that he worked for in private practice, but also the extremely poor that he found in Hale County, Alabama. I'm just going to read a little bit of stuff so I get all the kind of the grown-up stuff out of the way, and then I'll just ad-lib the rest of this nonsense. So, the Rural Studio is an undergraduate educational program, and it's part of the 5-year Bachelor of Architecture at Auburn University. Auburn is one of only 2 schools of architecture in Alabama. It's the only state school, and it's the oldest state school in the South, in the southern part of the United States. The Rural Studio is now in its 10th year, and it was set up by D.K. Ruth and Sambo as a response to 2 things. There was a desire for a more hands-on approach for architecture students. And there was an interest in exploring the definitive rural house. The chosen location, Hale County, Alabama, is an area well documented in the seminal 1930s Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. I don't know if any of you know of that publication, but it was written by James Agee with some amazing photographs by Walker Evans. And they were wandering around in the 1930s and taking photographs of really extreme poverty that people really didn't expect to exist in the United States of America. Just a quick geography lesson for you all. This is the United States of America, and you can all go boo, and I completely agree with you. It's presently run by a lunatic. This would be Alabama, I guess, and it's the one in kind of pink, and it's at the very poor tail end of the Appalachians. So the Appalachians run down here, and the Rural Studio is based in really this kind of hotbed of the civil rights and the activism that went on through a number of years. We are based here, which is Newbern. Here's Selma and Birmingham and Montgomery. And you'll probably know of Selma because of I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Pettus Bridge and the march across the Pettus, the voters' rights march across the bridge, and also the woman whose name I forget that sat down on the bus in Montgomery. So this kind of area is a hotbed of that, the civil rights, and it's also known as the Black Belt. Being at the bottom end of the Appalachians, it's not known as the Black Belt because there are lots of black folk, although there are lots of black folk. It's also because of the type of soil there. It's this amazing red dirt that actually kind of propagated cotton and is now leading to other things. Just quickly, we're here. We're sort of 2 hours away from Birmingham, in the middle of nowhere. We have a little town of 202 people, and I think one of the geniuses of Mockbee was to find a place where it put students into complete and utter isolation. The other active genius was being 3 hours away from Auburn, the mothership, so he could be away from deans and directors and all those nasty people that are likely to stop the sorts of nonsense that goes on at the Rural Studio. So I'll move on. This is a Walker Evans. I guess very little has changed. This is Walker Evans, Main Street, Greensboro, circa 1930s. This is a photograph of the same street this last year, so you can see that nothing much changes, quite frankly. This is, again, Walker Evans. It's a sharecropper's front room, circa 1930. This is a shot taken by a student quite recently of the similar kind of front room. So nothing much has moved on, quite honestly. And I could tell you. In Mockbee's lecture, he'd start banging the desk and beating his chest because Hale County has 16,000 inhabitants. To his disgust, 36% of those 16,000 people live below the poverty level, and 45% of the kids under the age of 5 live below the poverty level. And to him, in goddamn United States of America, that's just outrageous, and I think we should be outraged, and you all should be outraged, and screw George Bush. So, it's also it's an extraordinarily beautiful faith-based county. There is religion is everywhere, but there's extraordinary wealth, really. And it's white wealth, which is a sort of a remnant of the cotton trade. Greensboro, particularly Greensboro and Marion, which are sort of the county seats close by to where we are. There's still a lot of evidence of the old white wealth, mainly because during the Civil War, the people of Marion and the people of Greensboro fought so hard they kept the Union out and stopped them burning down these homes. Because when the Union came in, they just pillaged the place and burnt the whole place down. So we're kind of lucky to have this evidence, but it's right there in the faces of the poor people as well, which is kind of interesting. At the same time, you have this. This is Lucy's old home in Masons Bend, Alabama. So there's quite a contrast, as you might say. But there's extraordinary dignity. This is Alberta Bryant. We did a house for Alberta. She delights in using her false leg as a kind of an implement to either hit me or her grandchildren. She has she's diabetic. They have appalling diet. I mean, it is fried chicken, quite frankly, and it's fried chicken and more fried chicken and a few collard greens. And there's very little comes out of the ground for whatever reasons. There's not really a culture of taking food out of the ground anymore. She's actually lost both legs. But she has extraordinary dignity, and amongst all of that, there's one person in the world that should be pissed off and bitter. Alberta Bryant should be. And she's an amazing woman. I've been lucky enough to build up a really wonderful relationship with her, and she's always making fun of my strange haircuts and things, which I don't know. She finds vaguely effeminate or something. I don't know what it's all about. The demise of the cotton industry. I mean, this is these extraordinary forms when they gather the cotton. You see these in the fields. There's still a little bit of evidence of that. That's what the red clay propagated. The land has been kind of raped and pillaged of its hardwoods. There's a lot of much of the land is actually owned by paper manufacturers. So as a consequence of that, there's very little real estate tax because they're so powerful. So education suffers because there's no money to fund education through the real estate tax. They actually fund it through sales tax. And as you can imagine, in a poor place like Alabama, no one spends any money. So I guess this is a bunch of our students raping and pillaging the land. The catfish industry was seen as our savior about 10 years ago. This is West Alabama's Young Farmer of the Year, Laird Cole. He combines dairy farming with catfish farming. Catfish is 50 cents a pound at the moment, which is basically break even. They can dig a catfish pond in the same red clay that they used to grow cotton in because it essentially holds water. The water won't leak out, and it seemed like a good thing to do, but apparently the Vietnamese are undercutting us now. So it's kind of a road to nowhere, and there's these all over Hale County. Hale County is almost one big catfish pond at the moment, and there is these amazing scars all over the landscape, these huge great holes that actually go back and end up being dairy farms, so that the banks of the catfish pond actually become the fences. So it's an interesting kind of change. Here they are seining, I guess. There's all sorts of things that are just amazing about the landscape. This is, and just delight you when you see them. This is an old grain silo. This was essentially amazing kind of slave carpentry. There's other wonderful things. This is one of my preacher friends. He preaches in one of the churches that we actually built, and I think one of the delightful things about these Southern Baptists is to see that on a Sunday they have this amazing opportunity to kind of dress up, and I'm always really jealous that they take and engage this idea of dressing up and delight in it. You also, when you're driving through Hale County and you're in the streets, you all say hello to everybody. And I'm walking through the London streets tonight, and nobody would make eye contact with me and I'll say hello. And it's a really charming thing about living in Hale County. Everyone says hi, black, white, pink, or green. This is Jim Witherspoon. He's a lineman for Alabama Power. This is kind of probably more slightly disturbing than delighting, but he's showing off a 14-point buckhead. Which 14 points means obviously 14 points to the antlers, and it's a big part of the culture down there is hunting. At this time of the year you see all these lunatics riding around in jeeps and trucks with amazing amounts of firearms. I mean, it's and everyone has to wear orange so they don't get shot at. And then there's a kind of the cliche of the kind of this kind of landscape. It's sort of in some respects it's a cliche of itself, but it's also true. I mean, it is very much a landscape of trailers. It's a landscape of these strange pickup trucks that everyone kind of hurls themselves around the landscape in, and it's also a landscape of amazing clear cutting. When the timber companies come through and they just rape the landscape and they leave all the kind of undergrowth and cutting, and it looks like Vietnam when they've been through these places. So into that, as a kind of a précis, strode a big fat white guy from Mississippi, and he set up this program 10 years ago, and everything you're going to see tonight was put together, was built and financed through soft money, through grant money. He spent 10 years working extremely hard, raising money, getting his face in magazines, getting the architecture in magazines, in a sense to finance the program, because the university wasn't interested. The university itself has a very poor history of race relations, and I think the Board of Trustees is probably a bunch of bigots, and I hope there's no one here tonight from Auburn. But ironically enough, when he dropped dead 14 months ago, we said, can we use his name to get an endowment for the program? And the university said, no, we're going to do a capital campaign. We want to use his name now. So it took him to drop dead for them to realize that they had something pretty good going on here. And they just gave us $400,000 a year overhead and maintenance. So now we don't have him to protect us, but we've got to have these, but we do have the money to kind of maintain the program. I think the students get three really extraordinary kind of, I don't know what the word is, but things out of this amazing education. They sort of get the arts, a kind of an investment in the arts and crafts approach to the making of architecture, the hands-on aspect of making architecture, and the craft. They also get exposed to an amazing community. And thirdly, they have to come out here and work in teams. And you all know from this institution, where you're all treated like tortured artists and you're closeted away on your own, suddenly have to go and work in a team of 4 or a team of 16. It sucks. And I end up being a psychiatrist, and they are doing a lot of hand-holding. But this is Main Street, Newbern, population 202. This is our new studio here. That's our workshop over there. And I think that the place is a very important part of the success of the Rural Studio and the project, and staying in one place. It's essentially been in one place for 10 years. We now own 3 properties in Newbern, and what we've tried to do is kind of have as discreet a presence as possible, which is actually very difficult when you've got 36 21-year-olds racing around in SUVs, but we have done our best. So I'm just going to take you around Newbern a little bit and show you the context. Apart from the genius of taking this program 3 hours away from Auburn, so that there was this disconnect from the bureaucracy, Mockbee also found a place where the building permit process, there's no money to police the building permit process. We're essentially the policeman. And I think that the students want to do their very best to meet any building codes and building regulations that exist in the Southern Building Code. But the nice thing is that we can be more like being a social contract than the way that the building permits are used at the moment, which is almost like design guidelines, quite frankly. So we have this kind of luxury of being able to say, we've got this pot of money, how are we going to use this sensibly and try and do the right thing? So I'll try and go a little bit quicker. This is the Morissette House. This was kind of given to Mockbee 9 years ago. This is the kind of the world headquarters of a Rural Studio. It contains the female second-year students. The women live in this house with 2 of our administrative staff, and the guys live under the super shed. This was a thesis project 6 years ago. and the students actually live in these kind of strange-looking things under the shed. The idea was to kind of build an academic village out here. And thesis students, when they first came out here, started to build these little pods. And they're kind of, you know, when you get to the 5th year in architecture school, you get this opportunity to build something, and so you sort of want to do everything that you've ever learned, and I kind of think they're a reflection of everything that they've ever learned in the previous 5 years. So they're kind of nice, but just so you all understand, the Rural Studio is this, I guess, sort of should be obvious, but the students come out here and they design and they build what they design, from the footings to the finish on the roof and on their walls. They'll do the plumbing, the electricity. We try and supervise it all. We'll have local contractors help them with the electric and the plumbing and come back and check it afterwards. This is construction of the super shed, as you can see. This is the delightfully known shit house. It's a recycling shit house at the bottom end of the super shed. We encourage the students to beg, borrow and steal and recycle. This is actually, the restroom's actually covered in Hale County license plates, reversed. And these are the kinds of people that I have to deal with. The one in the middle I think eventually went to Harvard, so I guess there's no accounting for taste. But she built the shit house. And Sambo used to say that if you got this in the right kind of sun angle, it would kind of gleam and glisten like the Guggenheim, because he always accused Geary of stealing the idea from our shit house in Hale County. More pods. This is the delightfully known flop house. It has a kitchen underneath, and then each of these little pods was built by individual students, and there's a pretty reasonable level of finish to them. The latest pod we built was a little cardboard house, which I think really shows you the opportunity that we have when we build for ourselves to really experiment. I'll say something about that later. This is where I live. This is the Spencer house. That's me, third from the left. And that's what we got. We inherited in that condition. That's what it looks like now. And I don't know if any of Lucy Begg's friends are here, but Lucy is one of our outreach students, and this is where she lives, just if anyone showed up. And this is the back of the house. It's a little thesis project for a kitchen. So our intent has been on Main Street to be very discreet. The local mayor was kind of anxious about what his Main Street would look like, and he was the policeman of our architecture in Newbern, and I think it's actually worked out pretty well. This is our new studio. 2nd year's on the ground floor, 5th year's on the 2nd floor, and our pin-up space on the right. We kind of just did this out over summer, and it's very hot in summer, very cold in winter. It's all part of the kind of Hale County experience. And then this is the rest of the extents of Newbern, our post office on the left and G.B. Wood's store on the right. This is Frances, our postmistress, and this is G.B. Wood, and G.B. Wood's he's the head of our students' union, I guess. He lets all the students fill out these little cards and have a tab for the entire semester and run up huge bills. And this is Henry Miles, my next door neighbour, playing his usual Colt 45. This is a building right in the centre of Newbern. We were given this building. It's an antebellum house. It's the problem with this project is it's got a lien. There's a lien on this project from the Alabama Historical Commission, and I think Margaret Mitchell once walked her dog in the front yard or something, and so it has this kind of bizarre historical value, which means that we really can't do anything about it. We don't have millions of dollars to renovate this fucking place. So it's kind of what could we... If I could do a thesis project or a Rural Studio project with this thing, at least inside, I could use it. But it's just going to sit there as a white elephant. So what we did was we built ourselves an amphitheatre in the backyard and decided that we'd make this place, because it's very central in Newbern. Black community on one side, white community on the other side, and tried to make this neutral venue that we could invite people for evening outdoor performances. And we've had a whole bunch of really kind of bizarre things going on, from Mark Twain impersonators to our local celebrity is a black entertainment comedian. He actually lives in a double wide next to the site, and he's often on television, and his dream is to use this place for a whole weekend of Southern comedy. So it's a work in progress, but you can kind of see the spirit of the thing. And then there's this kind of dog behind it. So this is the faculty, or was the faculty. I kind of show this because it kind of makes a point that this last year we've undergone a great deal of change. Obviously this guy dropped dead, this guy left, and this guy had ill health, and so we've got a very young faculty now, and the two ladies at the front keep us all in order. And the young faculty, as you can see, is very interested in cross-dressing and all sorts of things. Johnny Parker's our head of building maintenance. He's the guy in the tattoos and the blonde wig. And Jay Sanders is running the second years. So we get very bored in Hale County, so we do anything to amuse ourselves. And this is the rest of our faculty. Obviously, Professor Mockbee in the center, but Sambo set up this amazing relationship with the local cattle ranch. It's a low security prison where lifers are coming to the end of their time. So most of these guys have spent 25 or 30 years inside. And Robert Steele is now out. He's the guy on the left. He's a carpenter in Mobile. And Outlaw, better known as Gary Curtis on the right-hand side, he's operating heavy machinery in Birmingham, God forbid. And he often calls me on Friday nights for dating advice. But they're really, I mean, they're very cool guys. Sambo always used to say that they're actually much more interesting than the students, and frankly I agree. At 6:30 every morning I go pick them up from the ranch, and they're amazingly interesting people. In fact, I've got, if you can see, I don't know if you can see, one of the current inmates is a guy called AJ, and he's actually become my personal tailor, and he redid these pants that I've all got to show you, because he put a sunburst on my backside, and he actually dared me to show my arse at the AA, so I delight in showing my arse at the AA, which is something I've always wanted to do. But I mean, they have all these kind of different trades and skills, and we kind of delight in trying to help them and do that. And so far, none of the guys that have gone through with the program with us have actually ended up back in the NIC. And I think what's really delightful for them is that they kind of get to see and work with a whole bunch of young people that they wouldn't normally have the chance to. And there's kind of a good spirit about it. So, quickly on the ways you can go to the Rural Studio, there's a second-year program, a fifth-year program, and there's an outreach program. 3 different programs. This is a whole bunch of second years. They come out for a semester. In America, it's two semesters a year. So half of all Auburn students at the School of Architecture can come out here and work on a charity house. The house is given to a family. We choose the client. We've been there long enough to begin to understand people's needs and know a lot of the community. So they'll spend a semester here in a group of 16, fighting each other and probably hitting each other, as you can see. And but working as a team to make a house and a home for somebody. They go through a relatively conventional design process. They'll do, they'll each make a design, which they'll then combine into teams, and then they'll show it to the client. They might show 4 models to a client. We show them lots of models, lots of 3-dimensional studies, and then they go out and they build the thing. And that indeed is a second-year, kind of 21-year-old on a backhoe, and they build this thing from the ground up. And in the past, we've tried to be as experimental as possible, but more recently, we're looking at much simpler techniques, wood frame construction. Then there's a thesis program, which is the 5th-year students, the final year of their architectural education. They do 5 years continuous. This is an example of a thesis project that I thought I'd run you through very quickly. Again, the conversation, they come out here as a team. They self-select the teams. They propose a project. They try and find funding. They look for materials. The whole thing can be run and invented and invested in by them. I mean, it's an opportunity to work as a team, but also be kind of self-propelling, if you like. I'm just there to make sure that they don't waste too money and that the wheels come off. So this is sort of in the studio. They do the typical sort of site investigative drawings, what I call beautiful drawing of the place, collections of things from the site, beginning to understand what the place might be about. Do drawings for the client that are very about three dimensions, about being there, not because the client has never had an architect sit in front of him and say, how would you like this to be? So they're kind of very unsophisticated from that point of view. Lots of models, lots of opportunities to be at the place, go live on site. I think the best projects out here are where they really take the opportunity to be there, test the heights of things with different materials. Indeed, they do drawings as well. There's kind of a myth that the Royal Studio never does any drawings. It's simply the drawings kind of get lost in the mix as they're building. The drawing is not the final product. Many mock-ups of different scales. We have a mock-up graveyard which is becoming larger and larger in the back space at Morisset. For this project, they even did a computer rendering of the pavilion. This is a pavilion in Marion. Marion is the poorest county. It's in Alabama. It's just east of us. We're the second poorest county in Alabama. Marion had no recreational facilities, and the probate judge came to us and said, would I get involved in reopening this park that was a WPA park from the 1930s, and it had been closed in the 70s, and he'd just got a $100,000 grant, and I said I'd be delighted to get involved. And so the students went through this process. These kinds of drawings, I mean, again, it's not kind of, sexy fly-through and Columbia graphics. It's, this is what you're going to get, and try and understand a tree is a tree is a tree. We have critiques and juries out on site. Students present to their client. They got really heavily involved in the local politics. This is the Perry County Board. A really interesting group, delightful mix of people. As you can see, there's no women, but at least there are two female students. But there's county commissioner and the mayor and the probate judge and local teachers and someone from Alabama Power. So they really got the taste of local politics. They used local press, newspapers to. The project that they built was actually, all of the material was cut down off people's property. They decided to build the deck out of cedar, and they put an advert in the newspaper to ask if local people had any cedar trees. They got a great response, and so they milled all the wood themselves and used the local press to tell them about it. This is them going into the ground. They started in the ground. They start school in about August the 22nd. This project went into the ground very late, by this was in February, and then the steel went up in, this is the column footings actually. What they decided to do was, when they were milling the cedar, there was an awful lot of waste cedar, obviously the bark, and so they decided to use the bark as the kind of the face on the inside of the concrete forms. So they made these column footings that have this really amazing cedar texture. And then the steelwork went up, I think, at the end of March. So this thing began to progress pretty quickly. The steel and the columns went up at the same time. This is a local catfish farmer who helped them. He lent them their boom truck to put these things up in place. And then we contract a lot of the major structural steelwork out to, the structural welding out to local guys. This is, there's a 1-inch pin connection up there that Tim swears will actually hold up, so we'll see. This is the rafters going up and the plywood on top. There's some interesting framing going on in here. I think you can see it. They were told not to do it, but what does their professor know? They learnt a lot about working above their heads, putting a sheet of plywood up and then putting metal up on the underside. They probably will never do that again. But they learnt how to bend metal. The whole thing is sheathed in aluminum. This is the opening day. They graduate May the 5th, and most of these projects continue way into the summer. That level of investment is really amazing. We had somebody here this year until October on one of the church projects, so they really, you know, they match their investment, the time. They're really totally and utterly committed to these things. And I'm very pleased with the detailing of this project. I think if I brought anything, I guess, to the deal, I think that compared to some of the previous projects, the detailing's pretty tight and the craft is pretty tight. They use stainless steel screws in these boards, and to my amusement, they decided that they were going to line up all the square heads of all the stainless steel screws. So they really made this thing into an extraordinary piece of furniture. And it's kind of lovely, the way it borrows the light from underneath. I like it. But this is it through the seasons, a side view. You can see the kind of the cedar deck comes along and then wraps up and makes this what will be a handicap accessible ramp. This year we're doing 3 restrooms that leads off into the woods over here. And the client is so enamored with this project and loves it so much that our students have just proposed one of the restrooms is going to be a 25-foot shower tower. And there was this client meeting a few weeks ago, and one of the probate judge says, so how tall is that restroom? And the student says 25 feet. And there was stony silence, and then everybody burst out laughing, and they said, great, that's cool, we want one of those, that's unique. So they couldn't believe that 2 guys and 2 girls who'd never swung a hammer in anger could produce something as pretty as this. And it's a very nice piece. This is the sunset porch. The sunset's over here, and you kiss and cuddle on these are 2 sections through cedar trees that they put there as seats. This is them telling Mark Prizeman that he's the #1 professor they've ever met in the world, I guess. Big Selma, one of our ex-inmates, on the kissing bench with 2 of our students. Positively healthy scene. The other way you can come out to the Rural Studio is as an outreach student. Sambo, before he died, had decided that we had decided that it was going to be a terrific thing to try and... We have so many phone calls and letters and stuff, applications from people to come to the Rural Studio and get involved. And before he died, we had no money. I think the first year I was there, we thought we were going to close at Christmas. So we sort of had this cynical idea that we would charge people $12,000 a year just to come and fool around in Hale County. And lo and behold, some people decided to do that. And so we have students here for the last 3 years. The first time that, well, I could backtrack a little bit. Last year, all these students arrived, and Sambo promptly took them off on a jaunt around the southern part of the United States, where I think they simply ate a lot and drank very heavily, so they thought it was going to be kind of interesting experience, I guess. But they do these relatively small projects in the community. This is a little basketball court in Mason's Bend. The idea is that you get these diverse group of people, maybe 3, 4, 5 people, who are going to bring a different point of view to the Rural Studio. So you have the 5th years and the 2nd years who are all architecture students, and this particular group of students can bring a new and different and perhaps a more critical and mature point of view to the Rural Studio. Quickly, some of the projects of the past, as I say, the Rural Studio is sort of based on the rural house from the very beginning. And probably, quite frankly, the best house we ever did was the first one that was under Sambo's control, which is the hay bale house. This is stuccoed hay bales with this really beautiful porch. This is for Alberta and Shepherd Bryant, and the little project on the right is the smokehouse. Alberta and Shepherd Bryant was a fisherman. It's right next to the Black Warrior River. It's a very simple party, big porch, living area, and then I thought what I'd do was kind of I think before I went to the Rural Studio, I was concerned that, it was sort of this highfalutin architecture, and everyone was, that it was more about the sort of the art and the architecture than necessarily was about the people. And I think what delights you when you go there is just how unceremoniously and uncomplicated the way people interact with these buildings. It's just simply home. It's not treated as if, it's not like Peter Palumbo inhabiting a Mies house. This is my home and I live here, and so this is more or less what it looks like today. these are the little pods on the back, they're little sort of wagon wheels, which is where their nephews would stay. So there's great tradition of sort of, not a tradition, but it's kind of the way that families are down here is really many extended, a great deal of extended families, grandparents and grandchildren. Their original house is the little shack on the right-hand side, no running water, no electricity. That's inside it actually. This was their new front room. That's how it is today. There's Shepherd, Brighton, Alberta. That's their porch today. Shepherd still catches these huge great turtles from the Black Warrior River. It's a big turtle shell you see in the foreground. And he has these amazing cockerels that just, if you go into this landscape, you can hear these cockerels from all over the land, wherever you are in Mason's Bend. This was the first thesis project that we ever did in West Alabama. It's the little smokehouse. This guy decided to build this thing, and it's all made of broken concrete. Supposedly it was built for $40, but they say that about every rural studio project. Sambo called it the Alabama Ronchon. It has these little glass bottles, and this is broken concrete, and then the roof trusses are kind of salvaged from an old railway bridge, and then you can see the Hale County road signs that are kind of, I don't know where the hell they all came from, but that was the roof. And he had an extraordinary relationship with Alberta and Shepherd, and this is a house just around the corner. This was called the Butterfly House. It was built over a year. The first part of the project, they kind of built the back half, which was rectilinear, and then the students in the second semester came and said, this is really dull. We need to do something wacky on the front. So they built this amazing screen porch on the front, which Anderson Harris and Ora Lee, they spent most of the end of their days sitting out on this porch and in the screen porch. It's a very beautiful place. There's the porch, there's the interior of it. It was a really terrific essay in wood frame construction, quite frankly. And that's how it is today. It's interesting when you kind of have this kind of shantytown context, and I think how well these things kind of fit in. Again, when I go back to this conversation about the unpretentious way that people live, this is their home, when the house was finished, and this is their home today. And they have this amazing collection of cuttings from newspapers, and there's kind of Ronald Reagan next to Nelson Mandela on the wall, which, and probably George Bush is up there as well, I don't know. But, and then most recently, we did a huge house for a woman with 6 kids, a single mum with 6 kids, and we built it out of rammed earth. The nice thing about rammed dirt is you use these sort of concrete forms, and then you fill this thing with dirt and you tamp it, and by the end of the day 16 second years are really tired, so you can kind of exhaust them and keep them quiet that way. We also encourage our guys from the Alabama Department of Corrections to come and check out the women, so that's what the house looks like. You can see we built the front half, and it's kind of, most of these projects have big roofs, and they have big roofs for a really good reason, to protect the walls. If you ever, most of the kind of farm vernacular is a big roof protecting the walls, and that's why these buildings have lasted 100, 150 years. And with the rammed earth, where we'd put the roof on at Christmas, we hadn't put the roof on over the back. And after we came back from Christmas vacation, and all of the rammed earth surface had kind of, the water had got behind the finish and had just literally popped it off. And so, you learn the hard way, I guess. But this is a second-year house, beautiful texture. But again, what happens with the second year is everyone wants to be leader of the orchestra. They all want to design something, This is a rammed earth door. It's like, okay, all right. But the texture is gorgeous. I mean, you can see, it looks like the strata through the earth. Latest house, and this is for all you guys that showed up. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up on where we're at. This is Music Man, the amazing Music Man, and Jimmy Lee Matthews. These are some of his signs, just alerting you to where his land is. Music Man is a kind of an institution in Hale County. He rides around on this scooter. He never throws anything away. He used to be a disc jockey. His full name is Jimmy Lee Matthews, and he's actually above the law. He was riding around on this motor scooter, and one of the local state police had him for not having license plates on his motor scooter. And this was a young guy. He was new at the job on the state. Judge Ryan, our local high court judge, called up the police officer and said, "Look, Music Man, you don't need to give him tickets. He's above the law, okay?" So this guy, everyone black and white knows this guy around Hale County. And he had been living in this sort of shanty complex without running water. And it's been a truly amazing experience for the students to work with him. All of these buildings were inhabited by various members of his family, and as they've died, he's just left them. And so we have this amazing, it's like Rome or something. You've got this opportunity to kind of add these new pieces into this texture, which is really bizarre. So here he is in these. I mean, he never throws anything away. He's got like 25 refrigerators and, 40 stereos. And when you go there, the music's playing full blast. You can find the site because of the music, which I guess is why it's called. He also writes these amazing signs everywhere, puts his phone number on it, and I don't know what this one says. But he's been an amazing guy to work with for the students. Yeah, I don't know if I'd let my kid near him, but he's an extraordinary God-fearer. Every time you go meet him, he will preach a sermon to you, and but very sweet and gentle, and he's just so grateful. This is a little shed that we built as a kind of a test for the final house that we're going to give him. We decided to downscale the size of our houses after that. The rammed earth aircraft carrier that we built before, that which really got out of hand and ended up taking like 2.5 years to build. So we decided to go back in scale. And he had started building something himself, and so we Jay let the students experiment on this raised deck that he'd started to build. And this is a sort of a temporary place for him to live while we're building him a house. And this is the access ramp for the motorbike, so he can drive the bike straight into the house. This is kind of a bad model, but it's a very simple little linear building with a kind of a whacked out toilet on the end. And there's an amazing view over here. He owns, as he calls it, as far as the eye can see. And so we've given him an extraordinary view out of his bathroom and out of this back facade. This is the front of it. It slides between these cedar trees that he planted, and is very proud of these cedar trees. Then there's this kind of whacked out bit that comes out of the back. So there's this kind of very simple form over here, and then these strange curving walls for the restrooms and the shower. And the students learn how to deal with curves, I guess, out of wood. And there's Music Man testing the view from the toilet. And that's the view that he gets out of the toilet. And he's going to have an outside shower just outside this window. So I want to be the first one to use that toilet, I think. But he's a great guy. And this is the entrance gate. This guy is something else. I mean, this was done by a local folk artist whose name suddenly escapes me, but he came and visited the Royal Studio, and he got to know Music Man, and so the kind of Music Man and Butch Anthony is his name. He's a pretty well-known folk artist in the South, and he decided to do a new entrance gate for Music Man. So you can see the clever thing about it is that it stays as one big gate, but there's this kind of there's this central area that allows him to zip straight through the middle on his bike, and I don't know. This is weird. Anyway, back to grown-up architecture. This was one of the first thesis projects after the smokehouse. It's a pavilion for a small town called Akron, built of railroad trusses, and it's got this sort of, the bottom chord actually runs below the brickwork here. This was land that was donated by a guy called Bob Wilson from Akron, and this is still a very well-used place. The tire chapel was, maybe some of you have seen this project. It was, they built this, the guys built this tire chapel out of 900 tires that a guy in Selma was going to be taken to court because he had this, all of these tires, and he was going to be fined for having them because they were a fire hazard. So we took them on, and the amazing thing about this site is its siting. It's put on the edge of a crevice, so when you enter this sort of tunnel, the view down here sort of opens up. It's actually very difficult to photograph. This is the entry view. It's tires covered in a pink concrete. These are the guys that built it. Steve Durden's on the guy on the left. They used to ram these. When you do 900 tires and you ram them full of earth, you become quite an Adonis. And local people used to queue to come and watch them because they used to ram this dirt naked. Also, is the myth about this thing. But the other thing that I think I put this photograph in was because the other myth about this project is that they built this amazing network of what's the word? Scaffolding, and the way they built the roof was that they put the scaffolding in first, and then as they built the roof, they took the wood from the scaffolding, so they kind of worked back from the front to the back, and the scaffolding reduced as they put more wood up into the roof of the structure. It's a pretty amazing space. Doesn't do it at all justice in the photographs. There you can see the view of the cliff. This is a private chapel. We have stopped doing projects on private land because the woman that inherited this project won't let us go and see it, and has become very difficult. And I think it was in some book somewhere that said it was one of the most amazing pieces of architecture in the last 10 years in the US or something, and it's quite something. This is a project that was done next to it, a thing called the Goat House. This is an artist's retreat, called the Goat House because there were a whole bunch of goats living in the building when they got there. And again, the same person sponsored this project and won't let us see it and get into it. But the shame is that the two students that did this stayed there for 2 years and built this thing. And the craft on this project is really extraordinary. It's a little bit Martha Stewart, but it's pretty kind of wonderful. Back into Greensboro, a little bit more urban. This was a project for Hale County, Empowerment and Revitalization Organization. They're a local umbrella organization for social services, and this little project just off Main Street in Greensboro, they needed somewhere to take children when they were from abused homes so they could interview them. And previously they'd been taken in a squad car to Tuscaloosa, 25 miles, and Hero asked us to do a project for them, which is the kind of funky looking dog trot thing in the center. It's essentially two little boxes. Here's the interview room, here's a classroom with a modified dog trot in between. It was built by 4 ladies on time and on budget. It was probably the most sophisticated rural studio project done at that time. We had local contractor come in and do the air conditioning. But really quite simple boxes, but here's inside the classroom. And then the couple of landscape students came out and did the playground in the back, which has proved an extraordinary success. Back to Mason's Bend. This is Shantyland. This is kind of the little town that time forgot. really an old slave community, and it's a kind of mixture of little shanties and trailers. There's no well, actually, there is a sewer line and a water line now, and that was, I think, put in as a response to the kind of the publicity that some of our projects had gotten. It's an amazing place. It's where the hay bale and the butterfly house are. But we did this little community chapel for them, what Sambo called the conference center. It's a combination of round earth, aluminum, and then these amazing windshield structure from Chevrolet Caprices. The guys went up to Chicago and went to a used car lot, and it's one of those things where you can take as much as you want for $100. And they went and kind of pillaged all of these windshields out of cars in Chicago parking used lot. And you can see there are two holes drilled in these side-light windows, and they figured out a way that you could attach them to a metal structure and use them like a fish skin. This was a mock-up. This is them installing them. I think there's 110 of these things in the project. But so this is the bend, and there's a little project, the entrance through there. This is used as a car wash. It's used for women's meetings on Thursday night. And it's used as a bus stop. Essentially, the kids are let off the bus after school, and they go and play inside here. And they've started to scribble their names and inscribe their names in the dirt wall. But quite pretty. Everyone says it's much smaller when you go and see this thing. Somehow, everyone from these photographs, it kind of looks like Paris or something. This was graduation day. Not normally full of white people, but I guess it's full of white people that day. This is a project more recently, a Boys and Girls Club. Again, Akron, Alabama. This was an existing burnt-out shell. Bob Wilson donated the land to us and asked us if we'd do a Boys and Girls Club. And Brad Shelton and Craig Peavy and Patrick Ryan, probably three of the most amazing students I've ever come across. They could, fix your refrigerator, your computer, and your car all at once. And they took this thing on, and it's about 1,500 square feet of conditioned space. The local kids have nowhere to go after school. Most of their parents work 25 miles away in Tuscaloosa. There's no art programs, and immediately our guys pulled their kind of construction trailer onto site. The kids spent a lot of time just playing around and playing with the guys. These are two local guys, Mr. Billy and Pig. They showed up on a Saturday morning. Our students had decided to concrete the floor, and without asking Mr. Billy and Pig, the concrete truck showed up at like 9 o'clock on Saturday morning, and I think our guys thought they were going to finish this floor themselves. And the locals are extremely good concrete finishers, and they spend from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night just finishing this floor. It's an extraordinary thing. You can pretty much see your face in it. But they did the whole thing by hand. The other nice story about this project is that a guy from Florida, actually from Birmingham, called us up and said, there's a shoe factory in Florida that's just bottomed up, and I've got all this steel. Do your guys want to use it? And so Brad Shelton went over there and said, hell yeah, we want this. And so he convinced Jim Turnipseed to re-engineer the trusses, then they called up Shelton State Community College, which is 25 miles away, and they got their welding program to re-weld the ends of the bar joists. Then they had the effrontery to ask the Shelton State Community College if they'd use their truck driving program to deliver it to site. So they got $25,000 worth of steel for pretty much nothing. And then we paid three guys, I think $3,000 to put the steel up. I guess they kind of liked their model. We do lots of models. Alumni showed up to help them. They'd taken on too much with this project, and it kind of tested everybody. So we got alumni to come down for weekends and help them. This is the president of Auburn University on ribbon cutting day. That's how it looks today. The back garden was done by the guys that did the cardboard pod. I'll show you a bit later, but it's a kind of nice little space built of cardboard bales. This is the space inside the big rec area with a stage at the front. The light fixtures are $1.50 trash cans from Walmart turned upside down. This was a summer program that one of our students ran for the local kids. I guess that's it at night. They did a pretty good job of lighting it. These three projects you're seeing now, they're all instigated by students. It's kind of changed a little, but they conceived of these projects in the second year. This particular project, a student had, his father was in the waste paper business, and these bales of cardboard weigh between 750 and 1,200 pounds each, and at least 150 of these are put in a landfill every day. And our student was outraged by this, and so what they decided to do was look at this stuff and see if they could build with it. And first thing they did, of course, was burn it, and it left a kind of pall of smoke over Newbern for 3 days. But it didn't lose its structural capacity because they're so tightly packed that actually the fire put itself out. It just smoldered. So we used it as a foundation, wrapped it in plastic, and decided to trap in any moisture that was there and keep other moisture out. So it became the foundation, the wall, the floor. Put a concrete ring beam around the top so that if one of the bales failed or went into failure, the ring beam would cantilever over it. And then, of course, the students come out when there's a photographer around. We experimented with running bond and stack bond. The left-hand side wall's stack bond. You need a that's the drawback of this stuff, is you need a bobcat to move it. It's great stuff, but and then they put this sort of delicate little roof on the top of it with a ring beam of wood around the top, tying the whole thing together. So the cardboard was load bearing, and I got them to do a roof out of cardboard as well, or at least build an arch. And they did some renders out of cardboard as well, so that we could, maybe experiment in the future with cardboard render. But we decided to leave the building without any render, put a big shed roof over it and protect it. And so far, it's been there about 3 years, and it looks pretty great. As one of the locals said, it's amazing how pretty trash can be when you. They took about 4 months to build this thing. The door is a cardboard and dirt door, and the floor is a kind of mixture of cardboard. They built these mortuary slabs for themselves as well to sleep on. Cardboard floor, you see the bale floor here. And again, we can do this on ourselves rather than kind of testing on some poor family, and if this fails, we'll just doze the thing. So baseball field. I mean, West Alabama, the black community on a Sunday afternoon, they go and, get their forgiveness on Sunday morning, and then they go and commit hara-kiri in the afternoon. And this is, Newbern has the largest baseball field in West Alabama, and our students, when they were out in there in the second year, met one of the players in the local Piggly Wiggly, and which is it's like Sainsbury's for the poor, I guess. And he'd invited them to the game, and they went in the second year, and they showed up back in the fifth year, and everyone at the field remembered them because they'd been the only white people there in the last 3 years. So they decided to do a project with the team and decided it was going to be this backstop. The original backstop was built on a Saturday afternoon, and the team helped them. Here's Major Ward and Moochie, who's kind of a 51-year-old pitcher. They take their baseball really seriously, and they really worked with our team to design the project and build it. The interesting thing about this project is it's built of chain link that's hung from the top. Typically, you're kind of pulling chain link to the sides, and this was all hung, suspended. Mockbee wanted something that was a beautiful thing to find when there wasn't a game of baseball going on. So it kind of twists and curves in and out through the trees, but it really comes alive on game day, I think. Quite frankly, because of what goes on behind the game. This is Susie Lee Williams cooking catfish. They all pull their cars up and turn their stereos on, and the place kind of vibrates to the sound. It's amazing. Really wonderful. The bleachers, students were going to redo the bleachers, and what they found was that on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock when the game was on, that the bleachers had, they'd been moved over 100 years, and so they were perfectly positioned so that at 4 o'clock on game day it's all in shadow, so they decided to leave it. The only place in sun on game day at 4 o'clock is the away dugout, so they decided to leave that where it was. And Jay Sanders, this is Jay Sanders, who was one of the students, is now teaching at the Royal Studio. He plays first base for the Newbern Tigers as well. So, quickly, I'll try to go faster. I get far too excited talking about all these projects. This is a little Baptist church. One of the baseball players came to me and said, "Do you want to come and look at our church? I think we need a new church." And they were losing congregation because they didn't have a baptismal font and they didn't have a restroom. And I went and looked at the building, and the building was sitting at the bottom of the hill and being washed away by the water. But the foundations were being washed away. This is Christmas last year. Steve Bourdain's in the front, who's kind of a famous design build guy from Jersey Devils, is telling them they can't do this project. Because they needed, what they had proposed to do was use all the materials from the original building, knock it down, document all the materials, and build the congregation a small chapel so that they could continue to come to site and go to church. Well, by Christmas Day, they had actually done that. They had knocked the whole thing down and built this little chapel. And the graveyard's just here, and the building really is about addressing the graveyard. This is it going into the ground. It had major foundation work. This is the steel work going up, local contractors. That's the local engineer, a guy from the catfish farm who lent us his boom truck. This was graduation day, so you can see they didn't even have a roof up for graduation day. But these trusses we hand built on the floor of the nave of the church, and they held church on the platform throughout summer. But this big window looks out onto the graveyard, so the idea is that you know exactly where you're going. This is 3 generations of the Fulton family worked on the project. It becomes a real family thing getting involved with these things. There's their mum as well. She was out there planing boards from the original church. Local, again, major contributions from the local community. This is how it looks. This is the south facade. It's covered in a galvalume. There's a kind of a wrap that goes this way and a wrap that goes that way. So there's a wooden wrap going this way and a metal wrap going that way. It makes a retaining wall that looks out onto the cemetery. And we had this window wall donated that kind of looks onto the cemetery but also reflects the cemetery. This is all student built. They finished this last October. It probably just about killed the Royal Studio, to be honest. There's a baptismal font which is underneath the I don't know what the hell you call it, this thing up here, but this there's a lid that actually lifts up, which is that, to reveal the baptismal font, and then you walk down to be baptized. It's a full immersion baptism. And the students did this amazing red tile work that makes it look as if it goes on forever. So it's black tile. When it's filled with water, you don't know what you're walking into. And it's pulled up on a come along. And locally, the other churches around there are now using this because it's so cool. Main Street, Greensboro, Hero wanted us to do their new entry facade and building on Main Street. So this was a big deal for the Royal Studio because Main Street is just so conservative. White-owned. They won't hand over any of the property to anybody else, and incredibly conservative. We don't want it to change. And Hero and the local judge really had a lot of guts by employing us to do this project, and this is what we came up with. It's a kind of a response actually to the fact that when we took out the old wooden facade, we found out it was actually holding up the brickwork above it, and so we didn't have anybody as sophisticated as Tim McFarlane, and we just came up with this double column system that essentially traps the brickwork between the double columns and then ties back into a recessed glass facade. This was the proportions of the facade are also based on glass that was given to us, we found that when these glass companies, when the glass is tempered, that obviously you can't drill it or cut it after that, so the glass, if it's returned, just sits there or they smash it. So this facade is actually based on those 4 big sheets of glass and the doors at the front, because they found that, lo and behold, somebody had been trying to build another project and they got this glass and it didn't work, and so our students took it. The stainless steel hanging pieces they found dumpster diving in Montgomery. It's like chainmail. I guess that's the students. They built this wall inside that hid 2 restrooms. It was really a sort of a warehouse space, quite frankly. The heroes on a 3-year grant cycle, so their programs changed radically. So we decided not to put an awful lot of drywall in here and really just kind of do a warehouse sort of space. And then the back facade is, McFarlane's actually to blame for this. We have a relationship with Pella Windows. They give us access to their second showroom and returns showroom. And we'd run out of money on the front facade, basically. It cost us like $18,000 to do that front facade. And they came to me crying, and I said, well, Tim suggested we built a second-year house completely out of Pella Windows. And I told them that. So they ran off to Pella Windows and snatched every window they could possibly find from Pella Windows and did this kind of crazy thing at the back. Nearly done. This is another project from last year. A young lady came out to Raw Studio and worked on her own. We'd sort of not been encouraging for people to come out on their own, but she did these little, what we call neck down projects, which I guess it involves the no use of the brain, as we call it. And she did a wheelchair accessible ramp for this young guy who'd lost the use of his legs. And this ramp kind of cleverly divides the front yard into a kind of an area for the family and an area for the truck. And this is Perry using it for the first time. And then she did this bigger project, which was a warm, dry room. This house is in terminal decay, and she had found this really disturbing situation, and we weren't in a position to give them a house. This is Essie and Jab. Jab has Alzheimer's, Essie is really sick, and this is their only habitable room. Essentially, Jody kind of shamed the extended family into helping her build them a warm, dry room on the back of the house. What she did was pretty clever. This was the existing restroom. She built a building on the back, put a new restroom here, left the existing restroom, and when the new restroom was built, demolished this, and that becomes the new entranceway to the house. This is them in their new room. This is a Hursley shot. He must have just like arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning and said, Y'all get out of bed, I need to photograph you. Because Essie really looks great, doesn't she? I'm sure she's delighted that this is being shown in London. But it made us kind of understand why and what we were doing out there, and a kind of very humbling project. Finally, this is a house out of carpet that they did this year. The origins of this house were an exhibit that I did for the Royal Studio in Chicago. We were approached by the world's largest manufacturer of carpet tiles to work with them to exhibit the Royal Studio work and to kind of do a partnership on various things. And I'd asked them about their various scraps, and they came back to us with this amazing sort of yarn bales, but they were huge. They were like 1,500 pounds, and they're very unstable. So me and one of the inmates, Big Salma, spent our summer rebaling these things to kind of hay bale size, and built this really kind of beautiful wall that was like a big cheer pet. It needed grooming every day, but it was really lovely. It's not, believe me, it's not load bearing. There are 2x4s going up and holding that wooden beam up, and it's kind of pretty. And then at the end of this exhibit, they started talking about helping us do a house for one of the families in Mason's Bend, and Sambo knocked up a design for Lucy's house, which this is one of the sketches. And they offered some money, and they offered all the scrap material that they had. And I guess the challenge was to, whether we wanted to kind of conceive of building this thing out of carpet. And the idea was that for the main part of the building, that the walls would be built of carpet, and we didn't quite know what that carpet would consist of. The house would also have this is the main family area, and then this is a tornado shelter. And the thing above it, this kind of whacked out tower form, is supposed to be Lucy's bedroom with a view of the North Star, and she wanted that to be above the tornado shelter because that was her meditation room. So this was a hell of a lot of concrete. But there's their tornado shelter, which actually is now used by all of those tornado came through a couple of months ago, and all of Mason's Bend crammed into their tornado shelter. We started looking at the carpet wall. Most of their tiles now, or all of their tiles now, are 100% recyclable. Interface want to be 100% recycling by the year 2010, and they had one warehouse full of these tiles that were before that time, and they couldn't recycle them, and they were just sitting there. And we went over to the place and talked to their technical guys, and they said, well, if you sit them horizontally, just the way you'd sit them on the ground, that was the most fireproof way of installing them. So we looked at stacking them. It's very simple. You just stack these things and compress them. And we watered the thing down and hosed it down. And the other thing about these carpet tiles is they're treated with something called Intercept, which stops all microbiological growth. Which is kind of disturbing, but it means that stuff won't grow on it. They're also 10 years old, of these tiles, so they have been used. They were just sitting there. Nobody was doing anything with them. And I guess after some head scratching and kind of dilemma and anxiety, we decided to build the walls out of this stuff. They're not load bearing. They have pipe running up through the middle of them, which are connected to a ring beam, which puts them in compression. So they're kind of post-tensioned. And then this is what the final house looks like. These are the carpet walls. The big window that again was 2 sheets of donated glass. The whacked out thing on the right, which is kind of awful, but I think it wouldn't have happened if Sambo had been around. This was a group of outreach students from a previous year. They were all architecture students, good guys, but kind of alpha dogs, and I don't know, wouldn't listen to everybody. But this is covered in some stuff that's, what the hell's it called? It's some miracle cure for bad detailing. You basically bandage the joint of the plywood, and then you cover it in this gunk, and I don't know, I forget what it's called. Probably done for slander, but that's the house. And there's the family. They're big guys, as you can see. This is Lucy. This is Anderson Harris Jr. This is AJ. They all lived in 2 rooms. That first shot I showed you of the poverty in Mason's Bend, they were living in that house. And I talked to Lucy the other day, and she said that AJ, his own room is this room behind here. He now has a room of his own. And apparently he's much better. He used to be a kid that was expelled from school like every week. He was a bad kid. And now, because he has his own room, it's made all the difference to his life. And, I'm not so certain that we should have used carpet tile on a family like this. I blame Sambo for that decision. But, there was an opportunity. They love what they have. They're very proud of it. It's given him an opportunity to have a really amazing house. The other thing that's, and his attitude at school has just changed completely, so maybe he has a future. The other thing that's kind of slightly weird, you all look at the furniture that they bought themselves, and they haven't bought it, it's all paid for, it's all on the Never Never, so they probably got like $20,000 worth of furniture, because they kind of think, oh, we've got a cool house, now we need cool furniture, so we're going to go into incredible debt to buy all this amazing furniture. So it's kind of weird. I mean, it's nice that they aspire to it, but I kind of wonder about the message we send, I guess. This is the whacked out tower, the drywall job from hell. If you're laying in bed, there is a big piece of glass, an operable piece of glass that has this amazing view of the North Star, and you can see that the texture of the carpet is really quite amazing. So far so good with the carpet, really no problems at all. It has actually, when the moisture level changes, there's a little bit of a gap created between the ring beam at the top and the top of the, it's not completely compressed. But they call their students, their little angels, and they love this house. So that's Lucy, and I guess that's about it. This is the spirit of the Rural Studio. It's an amazing amount of fun to be there. We end the semester on May the 5th and have this ritual burning of a pig, which, as you can see, becomes completely and utterly inedible because the second year students that are supposed to be looking after it all get drunk and fall asleep. So, but it's probably, I don't know. The spirit of the place, there's very much an amazing can-do attitude. We're bringing together people that wouldn't normally be together or work together, and I hope it sends the right message. I can't be sure, but it was instigated by Mockbee, I think, who was an amazingly good artist, a brilliant artist, I think. And an all-round good guy. I think he had lots of naughty dreams, and I hope he continues to have many more naughty dreams, and I'll continue to have naughty dreams with him, I guess. So that's Hale County, Alabama for you. So I'll shut up. No hard questions. I was told to have a seizure if I have a hard question. Okay, y'all, at the front. Ghosts from the past. Sorry, I go on a bit. It's very difficult to know, because I used to come at it from the point of view of being an outsider, and now I've been there so long I'm no longer exotic, and so I'm the insider, so I'm not quite certain how to present this stuff really anymore. So, there's a question?
Yeah, you mentioned that the Rural Studio is effectively the planning authority to Newbern, and then you mentioned later on about the mayor being very picky about what goes on the main street. How does that work?
Well, he, you saw the Red Barn, which is our studio. He essentially came to me and I asked him, I'd seen the Red Barn and we needed a place that we could put all of our students and get them to work together and have a design studio. And their conservatism is really no change. They're frightened of change. And in that particular case, I was quite happy. That Red Barn is a very beautiful building covered in the red tin. Who would want to change the exterior look of that? So you can kind of commit hara-kiri on the inside, but on the outside, as long as it looks the same and it's what they know, they're not going to be frightened. Strangely enough, next year I joined Newbern Volunteer Fire Department, and I've committed us to doing a fire department for Newbern. That will be right on Main Street, so that's going to be an interesting conversation, because again, the mayor, they don't like new-looking things. And previously, we've always had to kind of hide them at the back or do them out in the countryside, not in downtown. So
How do decisions actually get made on
well, you have community meetings. People will voice their opinion. We'll show them drawings. It's just this kind of thing. The people that care show up, and the students want to do the right thing. They listen, and people kind of get carried away. I mean, there's such a feeling of optimism about working with students and young people, particularly in a place like this. You know, it's 202 people. It hasn't gone anywhere or done anything in the last 100 years, or 80 years since Cotton left. And so to have this kind of vitality and energy come in, they're kind of, on the one hand, kind of a little bit frightened, but on the other hand, they're like, whoa, what is this, and can we use this, and let's kind of use some of this or be part of this. The building permit thing is what allows this to happen. I mean, they can run out in the backyard tomorrow and start building, and we have to be very careful and make sure that that it does get as much public approval as we can, that people are understanding of what's going to happen. But most of the time in these conversations, all they say is, "You can give us anything. It's better than what we've got." And so you've got to get them over that and say, but what do you think about this? I mean, I'll give them a drawing, I'll give them a photograph and say, how about this? And the other response is, we love it because it's unique. And if you give them something that they think is unique, it's like, hell, you mean someone in New York hasn't got one of these? Wow, great, we'll have one. And that's amazing. I mean, make them feel good. I don't know. That's it. I just completely underwhelmed everybody. This guy from Sheffield, this lunatic came all the way from Sheffield to see this shit.
What happens to the community and the client when you don't meet their expectations? You just said that they're kind of happy with everything, but is there any kind of contract drawn up? And how do do the students very much take it upon themselves to do the best they can?
It's a social agreement. There's nothing ever put in writing. From a litigation point of view, there are so many ambulance chasing lawyers. You turn TV on down in this part of the world, every advert is a lawyer. And one day, one of those lawyers and one of those clients is going to say, I banged my head on that door. I'm going to take Royal Studio in Auburn, and then the whole house of cards will fall down, I think. I think it has an Achilles heel from that point of view. But, really the public projects have been received extraordinarily well, just because the students are on site for out of their 1 year, they might be on site for 9 months. And so anybody that wants to talk to them can go and informally talk to them on site and be involved in the discussion and say what they think. And most of them won't say very much about it. I mean, the greatest tribute is if it's used. And I think 99% of the stuff that we've done is being used. There is an A tour, a B tour, and a C tour. And, there have been disasters. The front of Spencer House had to be demolished. Somebody did a kind of an installation on the front of the house that I live in 7 or 8 years ago, and everyone was outraged, and so it disappeared one night, I think. But there are projects where there's a water tower out there where we did a little house on top of a water tower, and the student realized that this guy was essentially wanted to be up high so he could see his black workers working out in the fields, and had this very bad attitude, and they essentially just walked off the job and said we're not going to deal. That was not the motivation for doing this project. So I don't know. I mean, you just try and be as grown up about it as you can. Everyone wants to do the right thing, and the great thing is, I think, with this education is that it's not a piece of paper, and they can't just kind of have this game with their professor and then at the end of the semester throw it over their shoulder. they've got people out there who are going to live in it and use it. And
What do you think the as an education students get from the rural studio that they don't get in a traditional design studio in the UK? I mean, like at the end of the 5 years, what skills do they get?
I mean, an amazing opportunity to interact with different people and learn communication skills, or try, be exposed to probably what most of them are not very good at, the act of communicating with Joe Public, and they are very Joe Public. I mean, they're responsible for their budgets. They are responsible for the life. We try to make, the Boys and Girls Club. The students took on the responsibility of of working with Boys and Girls Club of America to make that project happen beyond them leaving. So we always try to encourage sustainability, whatever that means, into the future programmatically. Don't just make a piece of art that's just, they're going to try and have to figure out how to use this thing. Try and be very aware of the possible uses of the way this thing's going to be used. Because it's a poor place, they have nothing. And so when you have the luxury of $25,000, that's a pretty big burden. I mean, they're going through it right this very second. We've got, half a dozen projects going there now, and they are in torment over where to spend their money, what their heavy hit is. Again, this is kind of the sustainability of these projects. You don't want to put the local authorities in a situation where they've got to come back in 3 years and paint it. They can't even afford to paint it. They can barely afford the toilet rolls for the toilets, let alone repaint the thing. And so the materials choices, the program choices, just try and be wise, try and be sensible. I mean, they always say this is green and sustainable and all that shit. It's just about, it's not all that. It's just trying to make common sense choices that's appropriate to the place. They're not rich people. So I don't know that answered anything, but.
To what extent do you see rural studios doing more soft projects, let's say planning for the little downtown retail strips, or land use planning?
There is an issue of where does the rural studio go now. It's kind of an issue that weighs, because previously it spent 10 years being about opportunism. You get some money, you do it, you never have to plan because you might have to close the door at Christmas, and that kind of gives you an incredible amount of freedom, actually. Now we get $400,000 a year from the university, and they want to know what we're going to do in 5 years, and I'm like, shit, planning? It's nice, actually kind of fun being day to day, but in the projects that you've seen, the Pavilion project, we are continuing the relationship with that group of people for the next 2 years. I've just taken on a project in Thomaston where we're working with a rural heritage centre that's going to be a 3-year project. So we're not blowing and going anymore, where you do these one-hit wonders. You have the opportunity over 2 or 3 years to really establish a relationship and do something, hopefully, that builds on that relationship. As for planning, there is so much, the politics of these small towns. You find when there's so little, people fight even harder. There's like 5, 6 community organizations in Greensboro. They've just opened another part of the community in Greensboro, opposite our new Knowledge Cafe, that loft-looking building. They've just opened virtually the equivalent thing on the other side of the road. They did it out of Drive-It, but this is because none of these groups, you cannot get them all to talk to each other, and we try and be neutral, but it's the planning thing is just virtually impossible. It's kind of small steps, baby steps, doing discrete pieces and hoping that you'll make connections together. You can't say, I'm going to come and master plan your town and beautify your street. I mean, that just doesn't. There's no money to do that, so it's just. It's a tough one. I don't know. But I'd like to kind of have continuing projects. And maybe the problem is that they've become very grown up. So maybe, like next year I've got rural heritage, the fire station, and another project near the restrooms for an educational centre. And I think maybe the year after that I have to do something that's not so grown up architecturally. It all seems there's almost too much architecture there, or too much sort of social responsibility. Perhaps we need to step back and wave our arms a little bit more. I don't really know what I'm saying there, but how do you keep changing it up and being critical and being responsible both to the program but also to the place, I guess. I don't know what I just said. Right.
Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you for that again. I think that was wonderfully inspirational. Makes me want to go down there and join you, really.
Well, we need a good engineer.
Yeah, that's what I meant. You need a good engineer down there. Two questions. One is, having been there, and I had the privilege of going down there, and I had the privilege of meeting Mockbee, and everything you said about him, I found to be absolutely the case. He was an extraordinarily warm-hearted person, an incredible doer, and he just cut through all the shit, which was a fantastic, refreshing thing. And I could see that it needed that sort of spirit to cross the divide between a community that, as you say, has almost every reason to be resentful about where they found themselves in history, and this very elitist Auburn, the Yale of the South, or however it's considered, suddenly putting itself alongside this, and it needed someone like Mockbee to somehow bridge that kind of extraordinary gap without it feeling wrong or gratuitous or patronizing or whatever. None of that, it just had this amazing rawness to it. But what always amazed me is, going to Mason's Bend, you look at all these houses like the ones you saw that people are still living in that are incredibly kind of basic, but which they love in a way. That story about Alberta and Shepherd keeping their house was almost like, well, I'm not quite sure about this thing that they've built. I might jump back into where I came from if I don't like it. But there's a sort of sense of, how do you make a choice? How do you make a choice? You've got like 90 people in that community, and you think, Christ, I've got to build a house for one of them or one family. How do you make that choice? And how do you make that choice when you've suddenly been given this grant of money? I mean, I don't know how much of it you can actually use for making the buildings.
None of that goes to bricks and mortar.
Gee,
so we're
really?
still
Okay.
400 is just overhead and maintenance.
That's just your salary? No, sorry.
It's yeah. That's right, Tim.
I'm sure some of it will find its way into that. But so you don't see the way in which you are proceeding with things, because what I've always thought about rural architecture, let's say almost agricultural architecture, is that one of its virtues is it's kind of repetitive nature. Now, barn is a barn is a barn. You pass through parts of the countryside, and they're all the same, and it's because of a certain kind of efficiency about doing things. You get it up and running, and you do it, and it's kind of. And architecture is about this kind of articulation of, well, traditionally, and as I see it, and maybe as I see it wrongly, but it's about an articulation of a cultural intensity somehow. That. And what you've done is, and what he's done is actually brought this intensity to the very real lives of people who are there and who exist there, and given them an incredible sort of sense of architecture for them. But it's interesting the way it weaves against the economy of, let's say, doing 20 houses in Mason's Bends. Once you've got the system up and running, everybody does it. Could they learn to do it themselves, like sort of thing like the Hassan Fatih thing in Egypt, where he got all the villagers to make mud bricks, and suddenly they were all making mud bricks. Do you think there's another way? I mean, what would you make? What would you make? Maybe it's black dirt. I don't know. And maybe that kind of inspiring of the Mason's Bend population to help themselves, as it were. I know they participate to some degree, but do you see it developing at all in that way?
Yeah, there has been a whole number of attempts, like, for example, with forestry. Can we grow a house for you? Let's grow a house for you in your back garden. The kind of the fly-by-night nature of the thing is actually incredibly important. What do I mean by that? I think what has been incredibly powerful about my interaction with the Royal Studio is that there's not an aspect of preaching there. They employ local people. They give this thing. There's no need for anything in return above and beyond the conversation and the dialogue. And my sense of previous sort of exploits of, for example, Auburn into that particular area is they do these sort of surveys and tests, and it's actually tends to be kind of perceived as being very patronizing. You're telling us how to run our lives. Now, how you get over that and help people help themselves at a kind of a broader scale, a grander scale, it's beyond me. I don't actually know how to do that. There are lots of academics come out and make exactly that kind of proposal. How do you get, the Ford Foundation wouldn't back us because there wasn't enough of what you talked about. But the more it, I don't know, the more it becomes like that, somehow the more institutionalized it becomes, and everyone sort of goes, whoa, a second, Someone called me up last week from Auburn and said, we've decided we're going to build a 100-person equivalent of a hotel out there and send 5 faculty out there. And I was like, you're shitting me. What? And I didn't actually say that, but I'm going to, because they build a 100-person facility out there with us. The end. Goodbye. So that I really don't know how to answer that question, Tim. I mean, it's the $1,000,000 question, how to make it more relevant. I think, globally as well. And so, what lessons can we learn? Because we have this great thing which is free labour, and you have no building permits. And so, how relevant can it be when you've got free labour and no building permits?
That's the question you asked us earlier, isn't it?
Yeah.
You said, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And one of the things that intrigues me is to know, intrigues me particularly, is to know what feedback you've had from students who've gone out. What have they gone and done? Because it seems to me that in one sense, the sort of individual hothouse technique that you necessarily run must have some feedback further out. I mean, there are 2 things that you could do. You replicate your kind of institution in other places, so they work in the same way. Or the other thing that you could look at and wonder, at least I do, is what happens to students who come here, find the work inspirational, and then go out into the wider world, not necessarily the backwoods of Alabama, and what applications do they have to what they've learned here? And that's what I wonder, what feedback you have had from your own students. It's a good and actually often asked question, because the thing about it is that even 10 years on,
the guys, for example, that built the Tyre Chapel are only in their very early 30s. When they're out at the Royal Studio, most of them haven't worked in an office. They don't understand the kind of the normal way of procuring or making architecture. So they almost have to, they go through this thing, they're not really able, they don't have any kind of baseline or, you know, what's the normal way so I can critique this. They've got to, most of them dive out into very, very conventional practices and then just go, golly, what's this about? And even in their early 30s, there's a couple of guys in Memphis, actually two of the guys that did the Tyre Chapel, who are beginning to define their own future and be quite political and be proactive and all of those things that we kind of encourage. That frustration, and maybe it's not fair for us to kind of hand this stuff up to them on a plate and then they go out and they kind of, you know, knocking their head against the wall.
But what about does anybody go out to other poor areas of the world? I mean, developing countries or whatever is that?
Somebody made the suggestion to me the other day that it was this could be very replicable in various parts of Africa, you know, just because of the notion. I mean, the students are very entrepreneurial. It's sort of about collecting, reusing, collecting, scavenging, and it's an area where they're, you know, Music Man has kind of done that all his life. You know, you could almost make his house out of all the stuff that he's collecting. Really, we should, quite frankly. Now I think of it. That's what we should have done. There's very few. I mean, to be honest, you know, Sambo is a genius because he stuck it out in Hale County for 10 years on his own. And he didn't have all the supporters that, you know, he got well known after about 8 years of being on his own, and it's tough. I mean, it's the middle of nowhere. There's, you know, there aren't any bars. We don't have TV. I don't have a social life. I mean, it's on the one hand, it's the best job in the world. On the other hand, it's like, God, sometimes I want to just shoot myself. And you know, that people in Hale County, if they get themselves an education, they want to leave. They ain't going to stay. And they're kind of, we're bringing these, like Jay, a couple of people down there who've stayed, and some of the outreachers stayed. They stay with sort of romantic desires in their head, and then after a couple of years they go, I can't do it here. And so how do you convince anybody to stay and make a life in a place like that? I mean, it's really hard. I mean, amazing opportunities on one hand, but there's not all of the stuff that you all enjoy in London. You know, how do you refresh and reinvigorate and do that in Hale County? And I guess my answer to your question, it's really tough to teach it. You know, Sambo took himself 3 hours away from Auburn and essentially really only spent 4 days a week, 3 days a week in Hale County, because his family was in Mississippi, 3 hours the other way. So the location of Newbern, Greensboro, was really based on driving. It was like, you know, toss a coin, I know this area a little bit, how are we going to do it there? To someone like me coming in there, I'm there, you know, 5, 6, 7 days a week. It's a difficult kind of thing to deal with. To just, you know, for students, they're there and that's all they've got to do, and that's why they do amazing things, because they put the blinkers on and they go for it. And to build on that and to make it sustainable and to make it something that other people would do somewhere else is again very hard. You know, everyone wants to go home at 5:30.
Another thing, sort of in relation to your statement of the question about, you're talking about basically vernacular, the question of the vernacular without using the word vernacular, seemed to me. But you know, maybe part of the answer to that is the cultural thing in the States of the individual. as you were talking about, the way to their heart was by saying, well, this is something they don't have in New York, so and people want what other people don't have, especially when they're, disadvantaged. And it's hard for bigger corporations or academics like us to look down on them and say, why shouldn't you?
Yeah, they all want cable TV. Everyone goes there and they go, why have you got a satellite TV, satellite TV dish? Well, because they want what everyone else has got, or better. Clyde Mobley. No.
Do I need this? No.
This is the Clyde Mobley.
What I was going to say, Andrew, are you in favour of progress? No, seriously, because you said about this 100-bedroom hotel that's built, you're on. So.
Well, I'm not off, but what it would do is it would destroy what really works out there, which is something that.
But that means that you basically mustn't progress, because if we get progress, whatever we can do, job's done. And secondly, if that progress takes place, what are the students going to have to do? What are your students going to have to do if progress takes place?
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So
Well,
basically,
we're always told
it's really there for the benefit of the students,
Yeah.
isn't it? And the spin-off is that you're doing it for others.
Yeah.
That's fine. But you're saying once you start getting...
Oh, we get the best part of the deal. Don't get me
Of course
wrong.
you do. Yeah. That's what it's for. Can I just say the other thing? While there's so many people here still, I've always wanted to say this to architects and students.
you might all want to leave now.
No, the one thing you did say, one of the benefits that somebody asked what the benefits was of the students. And the one thing that you said was communication. Now, the one thing that's not taught in universities to architectural students, I'm sorry to use this word because you don't like it, everybody thinks they're a puppet, but the one thing I'm not taught is salesmanship. But I would remind you that all your best, well-known architects in this country are very good salesmen. You're all very talented people. But it's the ones that can sell themselves that become great. It's no good being brilliant and being able to sell yourself. But I'm very interested to hear you say the one thing that students get benefit of is communication.
Yeah.
And I can't emphasise that enough. Because I've seen so much talent in my life working for even better talent, if you see what I mean, because the top guy is a good salesman. But below that level, there is huge talent. Huge. Because these great guys couldn't survive without it. And it's only because they're better salesmen than the second layer. That's all I would say. I'll stop there.
You got a clock, right?
Was that for him, or are we done with that? I was just sort of along the lines of this question of expansion, not so much maybe within the same area, but sort of geographically speaking, expansion. There seems to be this. I mean, you're in a community of 202 people, so I begin to wonder what happens sort of when sort of the visual marketplace gets oversaturated with these things, and is there an idea that in a way the children, so to speak, the kids that come later, are there times that buildings, I mean, you say 99% of the buildings are being used, and I can imagine that that's the case, but are there cases where students may learn from the failures of students before them and then correct those and maybe tear down some things, and I don't know.
Certainly. You saw the catalogue of work as sort of an encyclopedia of how not to do it. And, particularly in the early days, there was so much exposed structure. I mean, the glass chapel has exposed structure. I mean, the students go, and we actually do these kind of critical tours of projects. We also go and do clean-up jobs on past projects. You know, I think Ando's project. Ando's office takes his office to one project a year, and they basically clean the building with a toothbrush. So you kind of, you know, you get to eat your Wheaties, and that's what we do with the students. We take them back and say, look at this screw up. Look at what they did here. Don't do this again. And that's actually terrific to have that. We're very lucky. You know? There's one thing looking at a textbook. The other thing is going and fixing it, and the kind of the consequences of that.
But is there a sort of a continuation in sort of themes that you see? I mean, you throw up the fish scales of the wind screens, and then you have the tires, and then you have the carpets, and it seems there's a lot of sort of experimentation. But has there been? Do you see?
The frustration is there. For me, if there was one, it's they're 21, 22-year-old undergraduates. They think that the cardboard house did it with cardboard. They think the rammed earth house did it with rammed earth. They think the hay bale house did it with rammed earth. So they'll come out there and they'll say, I'm not going to do that because that's already been done, which, as you all know, is bullshit. I mean, there's a million things you can do with that cardboard, and I kind of have to learn, I think, to be more. Probably need to be more, you know, directing in terms of the experimental nature of it. I think, though, that a lot of the early projects. I mean, it was criticised last year for there being too much steel and glass. Now, you know, we found this opportunity with glass. We have a whole bunch of people of local metal fabricators that have been spawned from the catfish industry. Great guys. I can take my details to him and say, what do you think to this? How can I do this better? You're a guy that works with steel every day. So we're using the local guys to help us. And I think if people want it to all be made of wood and held together with pieces of string, I aspire to something better. I mean, I want, you know, a higher level of craft. Because I think if you don't, you patronize both the maker and the user. And if there's too much steel and glass, all fine. The students will go in 2 years' time, hey, there's too much steel and glass, let's do it out of, you know, hay bales and chewing gum or something. I mean, I think we should stop. Before I say something really stupid.
One of the longest question and answer sessions ever.
Right.